So the key to longevity is good repair and recovery, just like you're taking care of your vehicles. You got to take care of your body the same way. You know, Dr. Carter always says if you're a high performance, which we are, you don't put low test gasoline in it. You don't put the 85 octane junk fuel into it. You put good fuel in it. You change the oil filters, stuff like that. So out of 69,000 ICD-9 codes, because that means there's 69,000 drugs, there are really 4 mechanisms, and this is what my colleague at Worcester Polytech taught me. He said, don't memorize reactions, learn mechanisms, and it really works. So 4 mechanisms: poor repair and recovery, sensitivities, dysbiosis, thrive versus survive. What is that? Your body, if you're constantly in a state of fight or flight, you're never recovering. You're never repairing and recovering because your body's always peaked. It's always on edge. So it all goes back to repair and recovery. Sensitivities and dysbiosis. You're not absorbing good nutrients. So your repair and recovery pathways are weak. And then if you have stealth infections, it's because these things are going on and they take over. And at this point, your repair and recovery is really undermined. And that's pretty much the chronic disease story. So question number 2, since this group is smart, as they say in Boston, you guys are smart. What do you think the most important, when I say most, it's not like it's here and everything else is down here. But what might be one of the single most important molecules for repair and recovery? Don't look, Linda. I can't block it.
I know. I don't know the answer to that.
It's got to be O2, doesn't it?
It's cholesterol.
Oh.
Cholesterol.
It is cholesterol. Okay? And this is the article from 2007 that the head of education, external education at Harvard decided this year to take down. But fortunately, I had a message from God that it was going to be taken down, and I took the whole thing off. I put it on my website, and I wrote nasty letters to very high-level people at Harvard saying, I now have it, if you don't. And Dr. Carter goes like this when he sees that he gets blind carbon copy. But this is a really important statement from Harvard. Harvard Health, trusted advice for a healthy life. Who's better than Harvard? The #1 in medical research. Cholesterol is essential for human health. It's a building block of all the important hormones, including your fight or flight hormone, cortisol, sex hormones, testosterone and estrogen. Cholesterol is an essential component of the membranes that surround all human cells. So let's stop its production.
Yeah.
Because if we do that, then we can accelerate disease and sell more drugs.
Right.
But I mean, you can call me a conspiracy theorist, but when you look at what Harvard Health is saying about cholesterol, and that the #1 treatment now is for gut, which messes up the gut, and then second is cholesterol. But cholesterol has led the way for decades. What other conclusion can you draw if you're scientific?
Yeah.
Okay, more than simply holding cells together, these membranes that cholesterol is a very important part of have a crucial role in regulating cell function. So not only are they the rubber elastic, if you will, because it's a lipid, it's a fat, that holds the cell and makes it malleable, stretchable, and pliable, but cholesterol is involved in regulating what goes on in the cell. So let me rephrase the question. What do you think, arguably one of maybe the top 5, but one of the top most important substances in your body is. Anybody vote for cholesterol? And allowing chemicals to pass in and out. So, if you already know about cholesterol, you don't necessarily have to listen. But the point is, it's not about cholesterol. It's about repair and recovery. Yeah. And then it's about science, about how we're misrepresenting data a little bit. And, I want you folks, because there's none of you, none of your friends and your friends' friends that have not been threatened by their doctor to take the cholesterol lowering medication. None of them. Yeah. And if they haven't yet, they will.
I have been.
Of course you have, Linda.
Yeah. I don't even let them check it anymore because I tell them I'm not going to do your drug, so it's not worth checking.
That's what Dr. Campbell says. Yeah. When they go to take your lipids, say, don't worry. No, thank you. I'm fine.
Yeah.
My mother had her second hip crisis. She fell under the care of her PT, of all things. We're at the Brigham in Harvard, and my wife comes over and says, oh, dear. I said, what? She says, I pity the fool because some young puppy just went into your mom's room and recommended she be on a statin.
Statins to his mother.
It was a bad day for that fellow. So it's not just important everywhere. It's particularly important to the brain. Cholesterol in the brain, sometimes determinant and frequently implicated. Brain, that's the name of the paper. That's why I have that out there. The brain contains 23% of all the cholesterol in the body, 25%. But your brain is only 2.5% the mass of your body. So the cholesterol in the brain is concentrated at 10 times the rest of the tissue. Why? Cholesterol is a fatty substance, and the brain is a fatty organ. Okay, so it makes sense. And the cholesterol makes up the membranes of all cells, and a very important cell unto which it does that are the insulating sheathing around neurons called the myelin sheath. And in multiple sclerosis, this is broken down to some degree. But one treatment for that is to have enough of the building blocks of the myelin sheaths, including the cholesterol, to support their structure. And within the brain, a large fraction of the cholesterol, neurons and astrocytes probably contain large amounts of cholesterol to maintain their complex morphology and synaptic transmission. But what they're missing here, Greg, I'm going to back up for Greg's edification, but this is Harvard Health saying cholesterol, the mind and the brain, cholesterol is essential for human health. It's the building block of all the major hormones, cortisol, testosterone, estrogen, vitamin D. Cholesterol is an essential component of all membranes that surround all human cells. More than simply holding the cells together, these membranes have crucial roles in regulating cell function and allowing chemicals to pass in and out. So just on that basis alone, I'm against lowering it, and I'll show you more. So cholesterol is so important to the brain that the glial cells of the brain have their own mechanism for producing it in the event of a deficiency, liver dysfunction. Most of the cholesterol comes from liver synthesis, only 20% from food. And that's not going to vary too much even if you go on a high-fat diet, just because 80%. So, if you change your cholesterol intake by 50% from food, that's only 10%, because 80% is already made from the liver. So it's a small number. So getting all excited about the food. But what I think this paper misses is not only does the brain have 23 to 25% of all the cholesterol, it also consumes 23 to 25% of all the oxygen from the blood, from what I've said that a little bit wrong, but the oxygenated blood that leaves the heart, 25% of the oxygenated blood supplies the brain. And once again, the brain is small. So the brain is highly metabolically active. Oxygen is an oxidizing fuel. So whenever there's fire, there's waste products. So the fact that you're burning so much, you have more repair and recovery needed in the brain. And cholesterol is a very important part of building brain cells, neurons. The electrical transmission is highly dependent on the fatty acids. And the omega-3s are very important for that transmission. That's why fish oils are very important in brain health. So that the omega-3s are intercalated into the cell membrane. The cholesterol is inserted in the membrane. So this is just another reference. Brain cholesterol, long circuit behind a barrier. So, just some of the articles that support how important cholesterol is to the brain. But I think I added a couple things, Michael, since the last one on Monday. Okay. But what is total cholesterol anyway? What is total cholesterol? It's almost like saying black is white. I am now going to convince you that the color black, we're going to call it white from now on. But that's how crazy this is, because total cholesterol is free cholesterol plus HDL plus LDL. That equals cholesterol. The sum of these equals cholesterol or total cholesterol. There's nothing cholesterol in HDL or LDL. These are lipoproteins. And there are many, many, many lipoproteins. And they have a very specific job. Form membranes, transport molecules through our system. So let me just give you an example. I'll show you here, because I want you to know what a lipoprotein is. The only thing that's truly cholesterol is cholesterol. LDL is a lipoprotein. But somehow we come up with this term. That's why I say twilight zone. We call it total cholesterol, but it's not. It's HDL, LDL, and cholesterol. They're different. It's an aggregate. It's not one thing. So anyway, so here's a little bit long, but here's by this MD that explains what a lipoprotein is. And you don't have to read the whole thing. I highlighted it. A lipoprotein are special particles made up of fat surrounded by phospholipid molecules. What is that? They're amphipathic, which means they have both polar and non-polar ends. So they can swim, they can live in water, and they can live in oil. So if you had a salad dressing that you made with oil and vinegar, the lipoprotein would be the thing that could mediate between the two. Okay? This enables, so this aspect of having both a polar and non-polar end enables the lipoprotein to be carried in the blood. So notice it's made up of it has droplets of fat, yet it can be carried in the blood. Your blood is water. Oil and water don't mix. So it says the lipoproteins can be carried in the blood rather than rising to the top like cream and creating blockages, for example. So the nonpolar fat balled up inside the lipoprotein can travel through the bloodstream despite being insoluble in blood. So anything that's fat that you eat and digest, in order for it to get through the circulatory system to go where it's needed, it has to be carried in a lipoprotein. Okay? So that's all LDL and HDL and VHDL and VLDL and all the other lipoproteins. They're just transport vessels to carry fatty substances through a water-based blood system. Why cholesterol? Because cholesterol is arguably the most important thing carried by a lipoprotein. But there are other things carried. But before we go into that, a little chemistry lesson. And if anybody doesn't like sarcasm, Close your eyes and ears because it's about to come. Well, next slide. But here's a definition of a soap. So think of this experiment. You have a greasy dish. You wash it with water. It's still greasy.
Yeah.
Throw some detergent in. Detergent is soap. What a soap really is a lipoprotein. Same structure. The soap molecule has two different ends. One that is hydrophilic, loving water, and one that so it binds water, and the other is hydrophobic, nonpolar. Exact same definition. Polar, nonpolar end is a lipoprotein. Okay? So when greasy dirt or oil is mixed with soapy water, the soap molecule arranges themselves in tiny clusters called micelles. So they basically encapsulate the oil and carry it through the water away rather than sticking on the side of the vessel and your vessel is, your dish or whatever is dirty. So from the previous slide, lipoproteins have both a polar and nonpolar end. So I said, let's see how many scientists, doctors, other people understand that a lipoprotein is a soap. So I did a search for HDL or LDL or lipoprotein and soap. Anybody want to guess how many hits I got?
Is it pain?
No. Zero. Yeah.
Zero. Not one association that a lipoprotein is a soap. It's the detergent of your blood vessels. And it has an extremely important job. And when there's not enough lipoproteins, it's like not having enough taxi cabs at the airport to bring people to the hotels or home or whatever. So there's a backup. So like one of the things, this is a little gross, but if your poop is floating, your lipoprotein insufficient, or your bowels, your gallbladder is not working because you're not absorbing fats, and the fats float on water, and they'll make your poop literally float. Very crude thing to measure. It's not really very accurate, but just one of my little adrenaline imprint moments, if you will. We're not going to go too far today because I don't want to get very far into it. So what we're saying is that what keeps you young is good repair and recovery, good absorption, low stress. Cholesterol plays a role in that. And then here's an article from the journal Neurology. This isn't a third-tier journal. This is a top-tier journal for the neuromedical science. And this is right out of the New York Times. This is their headline from the article itself. They have writers that read medical literature and then create, blogs on it for a layperson to read. People had an LDL of 50 to 69 had a 65% higher risk of hemorrhagic stroke. A hemorrhagic stroke is when the vessel breaks. That's a hemorrhage. When you floss your teeth and you see a little blood, you created a hemorrhage in that vessel. It broke. Why will some people's vessels break and other people's won't? The integrity of the pipe. The ability to repair and recover that pipe to make it strong. C-reactive protein is a good marker for that. Red blood cell distribution with. But LDL and cholesterol are also good markers because cholesterol is in that membrane. It's a fatty substance, gluing it and making it pliable. The phospholipid bilayer, cholesterol is in there. Okay? So when you're lowering your LDL, you're not transporting these molecules that are rebuilding the vessels. Because the vessels are cells too. And cholesterol is important for the cell membrane integrity and function of all living cells, including those that make up the membrane. Okay? So the American College of Cardiology has an LDL target goal for the entire American population of 50 to 69. Do the math.
They won't give us strokes.
I didn't say it, Linda.
Oh, well, I did.
Theorist. No, but this is just purely data. This is just purely data. You know, and you can draw your own conclusions from it. And I think your conclusion makes sense from an if then else kind of discussion. So for people with an LDL below 50, the risk nearly tripled. And this was published in 2019, just a little over a year ago, and that's the name of the paper. So, you know, our ideal value based on our research for LDL is 120 to 170. And the standard of care says it's okay to be 0 to 99. I don't want to be below 50. I don't want to be below 70. And I really don't want to be below 100. So let's look at some evidence that's sort of associative evidence, not hard evidence. But this is from the Wall Street Journal, but it's from a major study that was published in, I think, the American Heart Association Journal. But since 2011 to 2016, cardiovascular deaths have gone up in the general population on a per person basis, not on the whole population, on a per person basis by 4.3%. And in some healthy areas, Linda, like in your area, Fort Collins, Greeley, and Colorado Springs, where we just assume people are really healthy, cardiovascular disease mortality increased in that population by 20%. Yet, a high percentage are taking cholesterol meds, an even higher percentage are taking blood pressure. Well, maybe not, but a high percentage are taking blood pressure medications. So these types of interventions are not saving the heart. The data is just there. I mean, this is just CDC statistics on mortality endpoints. Well, if I have some slides for next week, because this is going to be a 3-part series that shows you what a cure really looks like when it comes to disease rates compared to what's going on with these drugs. And then I'll also be getting into the other cholesterol-lowering drugs other than statins and doing some comparing and contrasting just to give you an idea of what's coming up.
Hey, Tom, we don't see that screen.
Did you not see the screen at all? Was it?
We're stuck a couple of slides back for some reason. I don't know why.
Let's stop the share and let's try the share again. Harry, I noticed you were lagging when we were chatting earlier.
Yeah, it may have just frozen. Probably just froze.
You see that now?
It's coming in, I think.
So here's the problem with treating cholesterol. You're not just treating cholesterol. If you were just, I'm just making sure I have the right view here. If you were just treating cholesterol, that's not good, but you're not. Lipoproteins, among other things, are transport vehicle. This is not me. I have the references below. For various fat-soluble substances in the body, including cholesterol, vitamins like A, D, E, and K, K1 and K2, and fat-based fuel sources for our cells like triglycerides. That doesn't even mention EPA and DHA for the brain. These are fatty substances. So when you're taking a statin or other LDL lowering drug, you know, your body will seek its own level and produce the amount it needs. The brain will regulate that. But if you are artificially lowering your LDL, see, the cholesterol drug is not a cholesterol drug. It's a lipoprotein lowering drug. And hopefully I'll get that false language out of my vocabulary because it's inaccurate. It is a lipoprotein, particularly an LDL lipoprotein lowering drug, low density lipoprotein lowering drug. So when you take that drug, you are deficient in vitamin A, God's antibiotic. Vitamin D, better known as hormone D, regulation of cell division. Vitamin E, crucial antioxidant. Vitamin K, coagulation, which you need if you're bleeding, and redistribution of calcium, which is a heart attack risk. Triglycerides, you cannot lose weight if you cannot burn fat. If you cannot take the triglycerides that are produced by decomposing, deassembling the fatty acids, then if you can't transport them to where they get burned, you can't lose fat. It's that simple. Just bringing Harry back in. I have triglycerides twice. That wasn't an accident. You'll see many studies that show that statin drugs, published by Harvard and big authorities, significantly increase diabetes risk. Why? Because you can't burn fat, or you can't burn fat as efficiently if you can't get it to the cells. So if you can't burn fat, you're stuck in a glucose world where you become more and more insulin resistant. So at least you can burn some fat, you can start losing weight and start reducing your insulin resistance and diabetes. Fatty acids are critical to eye and brain health. You have to have those omega fatty acids, DHA and EPA. And your body synthesizes from those building blocks some very complex ones which are in your retina. And other important fat-soluble nutrients. Cholesterol is repair and recovery for all cells. Gills and membranes. It's involved in membrane function.
May I ask, why do you say don't supplement with vitamin E?
No.
Why?
Okay.
Oh, no, I can't ask. Sorry.
Yes, you can. Yes, you
Well,
in my humble opinion, based on work that Dr. Trump did, is that vitamin E, there's something more complex about vitamin E than just the supplement. Just like vitamin A is a mixture, you know, you take beta carotene and you're a smoker, your cancer risk goes up. You know, and what we've seen with the vitamin E supplements, at least from the past, is, you know, we live in an oxidative world. Oxygen, we're 20.9% oxygen, a little bit less where you are, Linda, but that's very oxidative, and neutrophils and antibodies kill infection with peroxide, oxidative. So there's a balance in everything. It's like calcium, it's extraordinarily important. Your heart won't run without calcium. That's why your bones are a reservoir for calcium. But you can have too much calcium. So that's why I say don't take excess vitamin E, because in my world, so many people are dragged down by infectious processes that if we oxidize antioxidant, then we potentially scavenge the important free radicals that are protective to us. You know, it's a double-edged sword. You know, we want to downregulate inflammation, no question about that. But we also have to let our immune system do its job. So we never, you know, look, water can kill. You know, a friend of mine won the national championship in cycling, and he was in the hospital down in Houston or Dallas. He was in the hospital for 3 days from dehydration, you know, from excess salt. But you can die from too much water too, or might have been from a lack of minerals, actually, from taking in water without minerals. It can go either way. So the dose makes the poison. So that's why it's up there, Linda. I'm not a big fan of vitamin E particularly. Dr. Trump did a very simple thing. He was convinced back in the 80s that vitamin E was the thing. And people were coming back and saying, I'm getting more bleeding gums and more of my macular disease is getting worse.
well, the problem with that is, you know, it's one constituent of the vitamin E. So if you're taking the the supplements that are just simply on the mass market, the D-alpha tocopherol, that's not a good thing. You really want to have a vitamin E supplement that has what are called mixed tocopherols and mixed tocotrienols. So it has kind of like the full spectrum of what vitamin E offers.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I think, you know, professional supplements are there for a reason. And you know, just like cod liver oil, you know, vitamin D, it's important to take, but that's just D3 in a supplement. Cod liver oil has D2, D3, D4, D5, and other important fat-soluble nutrients that just aren't made. Look, I'm a chemist, I'll admit I've seen them working in the skunk works in New Jersey in the laboratory making their things. It's not nature. But, sometimes it's important. There's no question D3 is helpful as a synthetic, supplement. But so I think Dr. Carter made a great point. So this, I have shocking up here because it's like no one can explain this. And when they do explain it, they turn out to be foolish. So losing weight, can losing weight raise your cholesterol from Livestrong? And basically it says yes, but they don't know why. But now you do. Because when you lose weight, you produce triglycerides. And to get them around the body, you need to transport them. And LDL is what transports things from the digestive area to the tissue. So if you're going to burn that fat, which is what's going to happen, you have to raise your LDL, your body, your brain and your liver will raise the LDL. Okay. But here's Johns Hopkins, professor of cardiology, God help those people, and he's preventative cardiology. He says, but theoretically, if you lose weight on a diet of cheeseburgers and fries, you could raise your LDL. And all I could say to him is I was going to say he was an idiot, but I didn't. No one heard. I didn't say he's an idiot. I realized he just failed chemistry. He doesn't understand that triglycerides don't just float around your bloodstream. They are carried in LDL. And if you produce a whole whack of them, your LDL is going to go up to, your body's not stupid. It says, we have a little excess here. Crank up the assembly lines. All it's doing. It's not doing anything fantastic. And then here's a health coach that doesn't do much better. When we lose weight, our fat stores shrink. True. Fat and cholesterol, normally stored in fatty tissue, have nowhere to go. What does cholesterol have to do with losing weight? We just have this cholesterol fetish, So it's stored in fatty tissue, had nowhere to go but the bloodstream, causing a rise in cholesterol. Cholesterol does not rise. LDL does. Low density lipoprotein rises because it's transporting more fat. This effect is not permanent, and cholesterol levels, LDL levels. But see, when you have LDL as part of the cholesterol equation, then it's plausible to use that language, but it's completely inaccurate. So what really happens, I explain what happened. You're transporting the fatty acids through the lipoproteins through your body. Okay. And so, Ravenscroft's a friend of mine, and particularly Macaulay at Harvard, we're really good friends. But basically, when you look at meta-analyses, I like to look in these studies at prospective studies. You have a population, you characterize them well, and you follow them going forward to see what happens. Randomized controlled trials are considered the gold standard for evidence. The only problem with them is the number of people involved in these studies are much lower, and they very carefully select the population, the endpoints, the study parameters, the power. There's all kinds of ways to contort the data. Whereas a population study are associations. They're all associations because the body's too complex. But they might be a little looser association than a randomized control trial. But I believe because of the selection bias is less, that the population studies are better. So what we have is multiple studies showing hazard ratio for all-cause mortality versus LDL. I hate the -C, it means cholesterol, but it's irrelevant. LDL quartiles. So four levels of LDL. And it's very clear that in the 100 to 150 range is optimal. When it goes up above that, it's really implying that your body is in a much bigger repair and recovery mode. It needs these anti-inflammatory fats. It needs these cell membrane forming substances because the tissue is breaking down. And so we need to repair and recover it. And so at some point, LDL can certainly get too high, but it's not something to downregulate. It's something to find out why there's so much need for these fatty substances in your physiology. Okay.
Yeah,
The
it's the
transfer.
why, which they never figured out.
So we're going to do a brief interlude on data, and then we're going to end for tonight. And so I introduce it to create my own bias, but hopefully it's scientifically biased. The New England Journal of Medicine is the top medical journal in the world. And the second journal is where outstanding papers go that the New England Journal of Medicine rejects. That's, so Lancet.
Yeah.
No one who published in Lancet didn't want to publish in the New England Journal of Medicine. It's that simple. And that's Harvard Medical School. Although they got caught for fraud for publishing some bizarre thing on hydroxychloroquine, as did the Lancet, back in March, April. And they rejected my paper around the same time. So I wrote to them and said, you can recover your esteem by publishing my paper. And they didn't quite buy it. But I subsequently published it elsewhere.
That would have been fair and balanced.
So Nature is the most cited science journal in the world, and it's a leading medical journal. There's a lot of Nature now has many targeted medical journals. So Nature is, in the world, Nature is probably more respected as a journal than the New England Journal of Medicine because it's more well known as multidisciplinary, whereas the New England Journal of Medicine is just medicine. So Nature is right up there in rank, and we lost the control of the mouse for a second. So anyway, this is a paper published in Nature. It's a scientific report. And the title of the paper is Total Cholesterol and All-Cause Mortality by Sex and Age, a prospective cohort study among 12.8 million people. And there's the reference, 12.8 million people. A randomized control trial might be 500. Not 500 million, 500 people. This is 12.8 million people. Okay, and this is what they find. And this is published in Nature, heavily peer-reviewed. I don't know how they managed to get this paper there based on the cholesterol industry. But basically, risk of dying from any cause, percent increase in mortality risk on this side here. So we go from no increase to 140%, to 200%, doubling, to almost tripling. And what we can see, out of 12.8 million people, when your total cholesterol, in other words, your HDL and LDL plus your free cholesterol equals 200 to 250, that's when you have the lowest all cause, any cause. Can be heart disease, can be cancer, can be AIDS, can be anything. Stroke, Alzheimer's. Lowest mortality. Weight is more.
This is saying, okay, I don't see that.
If you guys don't see it, I'll put it up on my website. You can.
No, we're marveling at it. It's beautiful.
Okay, so I forgot to chop this. This is the 30, this chart is for the 18 to 34, 35 to 44, so ignore these bottom ones here. But once again, in the younger group, resilient people, less of a factor, but clearly starts swinging up at around 160. And on the other side, once again, around 240, 250. And then 35 to 44, notice that the curve is much steeper as it was for everybody on the low end than it is on the high end.
Yeah.
And that is completely consistent as we go up the age group. So this is the 45 to 55, 55 to 65. And you can see the older you get, as Ravenkopf and McCulley have, and all the Thinks group that I belong to have been preaching, David Diamond, and I have his book, Doctoring Data, will come to me. But, the older you get, the less elevated cholesterol affects you.
Yeah.
Or elevated, I'm sorry, LDL total cholesterol, because really you've made it. You know, at some point you kind of made it, and so your immune system is everything's kind of cool. So this is oops, these numbers are for the even older group. This is for the 60 to 65, and this is the above 65, I believe. Sorry for the clipping, but I will publish this whole slide deck on my book section for anybody to look, and I'll fix these slides up. I did this very late Sunday night because I was out on my gravel bike, and I said, this is the topic. It's about time I put it together. I started late Sunday night and then early Monday morning. So made some errors. So this is the mega chart from this study that shows the all-cause mortality, cardiovascular mortality, chronic disease, infectious disease, non-communicable diseases, communicable diseases. They've broken it all down. And there's one common theme. 220 is about the right number. Why plus or minus? Because LDL and HDL vary in these people. Okay, that's why you see the variation. Why isn't it just like a hard number in the middle? And it's pretty hard. But your HDL and LDL values will vary to skew what really truly normal will be. Okay, so just so I'm not crazy, here's a Japanese study on 35 to 70-year-olds, 41,000 participants. And they show a similar type curve, edging up, 180 to 200, and then edging up above 240. But a big spike in all causes, cancer, cerebral vascular, cardiovascular. The data is pretty consistent. The Honolulu study will go into more studies. So why? We'll just do a couple more slides. I'll do my favorite one, but we'll repeat these. Oh, okay, we are doing these today. I stopped here on Monday, but this is what a cure looks like. When they found a cure for typhoid fever, the rates of typhoid fever fell to the ground. When they figured out that pellagra was a B9, B6 deficiency.
Yeah.
And they gave those people the B vitamins,
Yeah.
the rate of mortality fell off the roof. Tuberculosis. Identify it, treat it properly, falls off the roof. That's what a cure looks like. So let's look at what's going on with statins. So this is from the CDC, total cardiovascular disease on a per population basis, peaked at around 1965, and then started declining. And in 1987, statins were first introduced and became fairly popular and really ubiquitous around 2000. And you can see I created this line here, and then I took it up and flattened it out. But if you look at the trajectory, when statins were introduced, even though cardiovascular mortality has come down, the rate at which it's reduced went up. Okay. And then I do this very simple overlay. Same chart with smoking rates in our country. And you can see a very strong overlay. And if you want to make a conclusion based on this chart, statins have actually worsened progress. We were making good progress. Okay.
Cessation of smoking.
And this is from a study from UCLA. Of course, they interpreted it wrong. They're trained to do that. But they looked at over 100,000 heart attack patients that came into UCLA Medical Center over several years. Almost 75% of the heart attack patients fell within the recommended targets for LDL cholesterol. When 75% are in the range, we have
That makes sense.
what UCLA says is we need to make the range lower, but it's obvious, to the open mind that I'd rather be on the 25% side. Anybody disagree with that?
No. No.
So he's saying they're pointing to that up there.
And so just to reiterate, Dr. Carter and my program, it's all about enhancing repair and recovery. You take your car for routine maintenance, you change the oil. Something goes wrong, the light comes on, you get it fixed. Our body's doing that all the time. The difference between a good carpenter and a bad carpenter, somewhat their skill, but oftentimes the quality of their tools. I know as a hack, I'm a hack carpenter, but my carpentry skills went way up when I bought good tools. Good tools are the components that your body needs for repair and recovery. We live in a world, it's changing, but for 50 years, due to Ansel Keys, we've demonized fats. The French paradox, 55 million French, the American Heart Association calls it a French paradox, because they eat the highest level of saturated fat of any nation. But when you look at cardiovascular mortality rates, they're less than 1/3 of the United States.
Some of that could change.
So,
Very interesting.
on that note, I'll just let you know I have all kinds of more data to go over. But this has to be our manifesto because, when you look at what's happened with some of our patients, when we make minor dietary changes and get them off these drugs that are upsetting the physiological balance, particularly of healthy fats and essential fats in the body, amazing things start happening. A lot of people can get by. I mean, it's never like, if I lower my LDL by 10 ticks, am I going to die? No. But are you going to be optimally healthy as you could be? I would argue, no. So that's my take home lesson. It's not strychnine, having LDL that's low, but it's slowly impacting your ability to repair and recover as you age. And with that, anybody have any questions?
That's very interesting.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you get me on CNBC?
I wish.
I wish.
Very interesting. Thank you.
All righty. Well, you guys have a great evening, and and happy Thanksgiving.
Happy
And
Thanksgiving.
Likewise.
unless I decide to talk labs on next week, which we might do, then we'll do the next phase of statin probably in 2 weeks and talk some labs next week or something like that. But we do have 2 more sessions on this to really cement some other aspects of what's going wrong with this approach.
Okay.
So with that being said, thank you all very much.
Yes, thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.